Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Foundations.
But the very first portion is where God has the prophet look and see this valley of dry bones, and he says, who are they? And he says, you know, Lord. And he says, well, it's my people, and I want you to prophesy. These bones are going to live again.
Foundations. Understanding the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. With Robbo Robinson and Mandy Warby.
We're in a series on foundations about replacement theology, and last time we looked at a monumental promise by God to his Jewish people that he'd bring them back to their land after a 70-year captivity in Babylon. Now, in this episode, we're going to look at a 2,000-year-old captivity that the Jews have been returning from and their national rebirth and sovereignty after the worst catastrophe the Jewish people have ever experienced.
And we're talking about the Holocaust, and we've learned in previous episodes on this subject that the Holocaust was like the culmination of the vile replacement theology that has infected the church. That was kind of like the end result. Really, really tragic. And so last time we touched really briefly on the promise that God would restore the Jews back to their homeland after a 70-year captivity in Babylon. This time we're going to give a bit of a history lesson before we get on to the phenomenal promise that God made to the Jewish people about bringing them back a second time from a forced diaspora.
In 70 AD, approximately 30 to 35 years after Jesus' ascension, Titus Vespasian led the Roman army against Jerusalem, laid siege to it, and destroyed it. Millions of people died. Many more were sent into slavery throughout the empire. The temple was destroyed, and the Jewish people began a 2,000-year exile. Now, that's, of course, a very short version, but that's essentially what happened in that brief period
and
there.
A tiny, teeny segment of Jewish people remained in the land. There's never not been a time in history when there were no Jews. They've always been there. And we've spent the past several weeks, again, looking at the appalling treatment of the Jews over that 2,000-year period of church history that culminated the Holocaust. Now, 6 million Jews perished there. And yes, millions of non-Jews also perished in that war. However, it was only the Jewish people that had an official, governmental, systematized legal process whereby the laws in Germany were changed to deny the Jewish population of Germany their basic human rights, freedoms and protections. The Nazis called that the final solution. They were identified, targeted, rounded up, transported to death and labour camps, and systematically they were brutalised, tortured, murdered. As Germany conquered nation after European nation, their system of Jewish extermination was implemented in those nations as well. And by the time World War II ended, 2/3 of European Jewry were dead, and the tiny little remnant that was left, they were destitute, they were traumatised, most had very little to no family left. Many had no homes, and they were actually survivors of the camps themselves. They were sick, they were frail, they were weak. And no homes to return to, no belongings. They were alone, and they were really just trying to reach Palestine, their ancient homeland, because, again, their homes were gone in Europe. Getting to Palestine was dangerous, and many were repelled by the British or interned if they happened to make it. Interned, and I'm not kidding, they were interned in detention camps in Cyprus and in Israel. There is a camp called Atlit, which I have actually been to and seen with my own eyes, where Jews surviving the Holocaust arrived in Palestine. The British put them into a camp.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's devastating. As you said, I mean, you know, they've suffered so much up to that point. They think, well, there's only one place to go, and that's back to Palestine. But then they get there and they get treated much the same as they were.
The terrifying thing was when they were entered into the camp, separated women and children from their husbands and fathers and whatnot. And they were asked you'll need to disrobe and go through showers to get cleaned off. Now, what do you think that did to them?
Wow.
The first thought that came to their mind is the British are going to gas us as well.
Wow.
Yeah, horrifying. It's just unbelievable.
Devastating. But you just think about that. I mean, that's the Jewish population, because of the Holocaust, was just decimated. I mean, there was just a tiny remnant that was left after the end of World War II. They were destitute, penniless, and just a broken people. And so it's just so devastating. But there is a wonderful prophecy in Ezekiel 37 which talks about life after death.
Yeah, now this is a long passage. We're not going to read all of it. We're going to read a lot of it, not all of it. And we're going to take turns in this because it's a lot to read in one. But the very first portion is where God has the prophet look and see this valley of dry bones, and he says, who are they? And he says, you know, Lord. And he says, well, it's my people, and I want you to prophesy. These bones are going to live again, all right? And then I'll just start reading a little further down in the chapter. It says, so I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, and suddenly a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to bone. Indeed, as I looked, the sinews and the flesh came upon them, and the skin covered them over, but there was no breath in them. Also he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, son of man, and say to the breath, thus says the Lord God, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived, and stood upon their feet, an exceedingly great army.
And then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They indeed say, our bones are dry, our hope is lost, and we ourselves are cut off. Therefore prophesy, and say to them, thus says the Lord God, behold, O my people, I'll open your graves and cause you to come up from your graves, and bring you into the land of Israel. Then you shall know that I am the Lord. When I have opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up from your graves, I will put my spirit in you, and you'll live. And I'll place you in your own land. Then you shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it, says the Lord.
And again the word of the Lord came to me, saying, as for you, son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it, for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write on it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. Then join them one to another for yourself into one stick, and they'll become one in your hand. And when the children of your people speak to you, saying, will you not show us what you mean by these? Say to them, thus says the Lord, surely I'll take the stick of Joseph, which is in the land of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I'll join them with it, with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they'll be one in my hand. And the sticks on which you write will be in your hand before their eyes.
Then say to them, thus says the Lord God, surely I'll take the children of Israel from among the nations, wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side, and bring them into their own land. And I'll make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel. And one king shall be over them all. They shall no longer be two nations, nor shall they ever be divided into two kingdoms again. They shall not defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions, but I'll deliver them from all their dwelling places in which they've sinned, and will cleanse them. Then they'll be my people, and I'll be their God.
I feel breathless every time I get through that passage, because it's like, I've seen this.
That's
this
right.
is living in front of me.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The people in this prophecy are the Jewish people, the house of Judah and the house of Israel. Where it says that they were cut off, that means to cut down, divide, destroy, exterminate, and excluded. And that is exactly what happened to the Jewish people through the Holocaust. Then God brought about the resurrection of their almost extinction. The two sticks are named Judah and Israel. They would become one nation again after being separated millennia before. Remember, after Solomon died, there was civil war, and they divided. It became the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah. And God says, when they return, I'm putting them back as one nation. The resurrected nation of Israel was described as becoming an exceedingly great army. Why did God raise them up to be an army? Not just an army, an exceedingly great army. Because he knew that their enemies would be relentless in trying to destroy them again. And the people of Israel would return to their ancient homeland. Today it's called the State of Israel. And Israel was reborn, not brand new, but reborn on May 14, 1948.
It's pretty spectacular.
It's amazing.
We're going to continue this in the next episode of Foundations, talking about the process of rebirth and how the Bible described it.
This has been Foundations, a look at the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. For study notes, resources and more, see vision.org.au/foundations.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.